All right. Well, we'll get right into it. Is that it?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is our last official lecture, kind of. Actually, that was not a good way of putting it. We have many more official lectures, but this is our last content lecture. It's a fun final lecture, also going to be super short. I know our lecture last week was very short, where we just walk you through how blockchain can be incorporated into your daily life and what it could look like possibly at some point in the future, like if everything works out. So it's more of a fun lecture. And then our future lectures down the line are going to be more special topics lecture. I touched on that in the announcement I posted. But basically getting into it, after this week, there will not be a makeup attendance form anymore, unfortunately. Obviously, if you have an excuse, like that's valid, just email us. But you won't be able to like make up attendance in the same way because the lectures moving forward are going to be guest speakers coming in from the industry. We're going to have special topics, I think, on. Actually, I'm not going to get into it because it's a surprise, but they're going to be cool lectures that you can actually engage with because you've done all the foundational lectures so far. So yeah, no more makeup attendance, unfortunately, or fortunately. This Thursday, we're going to be having office hours from 5 to 6 at Strata. On our feedback form, a lot of you said that you would appreciate office hours, so we're going to start doing that. If they go well and you guys want them again, we'll do them again next week, maybe even longer, who knows. But if you want to stop by tomorrow, we'll be there from 5 to 6. Also, spring 2022, if you have these slides pulled up, you can click on these links. But if you want to continue taking classes about blockchain technology, there are 2 courses offered by SCET. We also have our Blockchain for Developers course that we offer as a club. So if you want to get more into the technical side of blockchain, I know a lot of people express interest in interacting with smart contracts themselves and learning how to build on Ethereum, for example, then you can take the Blockchain for Developers DeCal, and they get way more technical than we do, because this is meant to be an intro course. These are also more specific courses with SCET. They are application-based, so I would apply pretty soon if you are interested. Also, we have a Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator Demo Day and Career Fair. This is November 22nd. It's going to be in person. There's going to be free food. You're going to have a ton of startups that are in the accelerator joining us, as well as VCs who are interested in funding those startups. So if you just want to be at the cutting edge of the space and learn what startups are doing and talk to VCs and see how they're investing and what their strategy is, like, please stop by. I think we're probably going to give some extra credit, almost definitely going to give some extra credit if you come by. So if you're missing a quiz, if you're missing an attendance, if you're even missing a discussion, and you're there, like, we can make that up for you. Just find us. We're both going to be working there because we're both part of the accelerator. It's going to be really cool. So you should come. And then the link is also on the slide deck if you're interested in that. And I think I sent it out in the announcement as well. Also this Friday, we have another Berkeley Blockchain Ecosystem meetup. These are monthly. So if you were at the last one, then you know how they work. But basically just bringing together people in different corners and doing research, et cetera. Cool. All right, let's jump right into it. So today, like I said, we're going to do blockchain-powered future.
That's one thing.
Yes.
One thing about Demo Day, that's actually how I got my first blockchain internship. I went by and talked to the company, and then even after that, they offered me an interview. So it's a great way to get involved. So if you want to go, and even if, like, by taking this class, you're equipped with all the knowledge that you might need in industry. So keep that in mind.
Keep talking.
Okay. So we'll pass it off to Ava. But any questions about any of the events coming up? Nope? Okay.
Okay, so blockchain-powered future. So picture this. In the morning, you leave your Airbnb where you spent the night, and as you leave, sensors detect that you're leaving. It's a smart contract that confirms that you didn't break anything. It can check the whole Airbnb and pays you back your security deposit. Then on your way home, you stop by Pete's Coffee. The coffee has an entire supply chain history, so you know that it's been ethically sourced because it's all stored on a blockchain. And you can find the trade certification and the soil analysis from the farm. Many products include this option, as well as other sort of options to track supply chain. You can make micro donations on the blockchain, and then you can see exactly where those donations go because everything is public and open source. And then you call your car, but it's not really yours. It's plugged into an autonomous ad hoc swarm of vehicles readily available for use. So almost think like a gig sort of situation. Accidents are rare, but when they do happen, the insurance agency analyzes video footage via a machine learning trained bot and automatically gives the victim in the accident the appropriate payment. Except it's not actually an insurance agency, it's a smart contract that pools together the funds of a multitude of owners and charges people the exact expected value of car insurance, taking no profit. So think sort of like a liquidity pool where there's a smart contract and everyone gives money to that smart contract, and it's always right because this is a perfect world and it can pay you out exactly the price that is needed to fix whatever got broken. And then the near exact probability of accidents is known because every accident that has ever happened has been recorded on the blockchain. Then you head off to your company headquarters to work for the day, except your work isn't really work. It's all voluntary because the blockchain ensures a universal basic income for everyone, and you're an engineer and researcher by trade primarily because you want to help push the boundaries of human knowledge. So your company isn't really a company either. It's a decentralized autonomous organization, or if you've heard of these, they're called DAOs, consisting of individuals from around the world who voluntarily signed up, receive compensation and pay raises based off of the quantity and quality of their research findings as determined by a worldwide Oracle network. So every single person in the DAO has a one person, one vote share inside of the DAO. And you can exit the contract at any time, you can enter at any time. Your company itself receives revenue over time as measured by the net benefit to society that your research brings. For the few functions of society that still require government, it's run by a democratic futarchy, I think that's how that's pronounced actually. But this is where the markets decide which policies should be implemented. So given a proposal to approve or reject, there are two prediction markets that are created, each containing one asset, one market corresponding to acceptance and the other to rejection, and that's basically essentially how any sort of policy decision is made, which completely removes the possibility of corrupt politicians who know little to nothing about the fields they write legislation for because the experts are the ones that are voting. Rather than an entirely blockchain-run future, it's more likely that we have a partial integration, and this is actually happening right now. So for example, anytime you go to the doctor, you'll be able to see your summary signed off by that doctor, sent to you for a confirmation signature before it also goes to your insurance company that's linked with the doctor's office. And you'll also have access to electronic health records, which is easily accessed for you by when you visit other public hospitals or institutions. And it's more transparent, more visible to you, and no one can see it unless given authentication, which is made possible by cryptography. Another example that's being worked towards now in the healthcare industry is putting the entire US pharmaceutical supply on a blockchain. The US FDA plans to have this implemented by 2023 in order to tackle the problem of counterfeit of medicine and just tracking, if some medicine gets stolen, like you can track all of that and make sure that nothing gets tampered with. So this was like a very, very, very utopian look at what society could look like. Kind of just a fun thought exercise. Definitely not going to happen. Or I'm not going to say definitely, but most likely not going to happen. We kind of just wanted to show that to you, just to see like, okay, if everything goes right, and like, why aren't we moving sort of towards this world? Like, so after looking at the utopia, we're going to move into what are the problems with it. So that's if everything goes well. Like, this is if things don't go super well, and Nate's going to walk you through that.
And so this is taking more of a realist approach on some of the issues that we have with blockchain, and I'm sure that you can all think of a ton, and a lot of the reason why blockchains aren't necessarily being fully implemented in our day-to-day life, just in the ways that were demonstrated by Ava. So I'll get into a few of the biggest challenges that we have, and I'd say these are really important in terms of looking forward, because these are what show us how we can think critically and really scrutinize the implementation of blockchain in a way that shows why banks are still so prominent and why we have these other institutions in play that kind of form our current reality. So I kind of distill it down to three main points. The first being this idea of technical shortcomings. So can anyone, just maybe you can shout out, does anyone think of anything about blockchain itself, about like the technical, or like the underlying infrastructure, or like the way it's built that might make it really difficult to be implemented? And feel free just to shout out. Yep. L2. So so I guess talking about scalability, that's good. Anyone else? Yep. Yep, interconnectivity, absolutely. Anything else? Low transactions per second. Yeah, per second, definitely. Anyone else? Yeah. Well, I guess we'll just go with those. But yeah, those are some really important factors that are, and I'll talk about this in a second, but these are all reasons why kind of banks, and we'll get into that in a second, but that's the reason why we don't see blockchain being implemented in transactions like at a coffee shop, because it takes too long. So another one, which we see more and more, and this is probably the most prevalent one that we'll see, is the idea of regulatory concern. And so when different, like maybe government or federal institutions, we can think of like the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, or we have these different groups that are starting to regulate either cryptocurrencies or kind of interoperability between, or like kind of implementation of blockchains in ways that kind of connect them with current like legacy systems, we see that the government wants to start to get involved. And so that's what is becoming a really big challenge. And so we're seeing a lot of lawsuits about like how we regulate cryptocurrencies, how we use blockchains in a way that fits in with this kind of pre-existing framework that at least within the US, that's been here for centuries. And then usability issues. That's a big challenge, and we're seeing a lot of transitions into making this more accessible. But, I mean, like we talked about early on, if you lose your private key and you're not, if you lose your private key and there's no way to get to interact with the currency, the cryptocurrency you have. So these are three of the biggest challenges, and we'll dive into them a little bit. So yeah, like we just heard too, so the idea of transactions. If we compare them with like PayPal and Visa, we see that the number of like max transactions per second from Bitcoin is significantly lower. And when we want to scale this to not just maybe a small community, but when we want to work worldwide with transactions, these numbers like that Bitcoin produces doesn't even compete anywhere close towards what we're used to. And so it would pretty much be a huge setback to transition from Visa or PayPal all the way to Bitcoin because of how long these transactions take. And getting to scalability, we talked about this last lecture, but we do have this trilemma of ways that we can only really balance security, stability, and decentralization. And because of this, we have to really choose two of these, and what we've seen so far is we lack, like while we have scalability and security, we lack decentralization, and then that creates these like lower transactions per second, which is like a lot less efficient. And this is another idea too, with blockchains, we can only trust the information on the blockchain we can only trust the information on a blockchain if we trust the information that is being put into the blockchain. And so that's where we get to the idea of oracles, which you might recall are kind of ways that information is added to chains and ways that like information is proved to be like honest, more or less. And as we know, there's no real underlying definition of honesty, and there's no way to prove honesty, but it's like the most reliable information we can get. And so with faulty oracles, we don't necessarily have solid information. And so an example, like a way that we've seen oracles be used to verify information is through this idea of supply chain. And so I don't think we've really talked about it that much, but let's just say that we all work for a coffee shop, and we want to make sure that the coffee we get comes from, one, it's like ethically sourced. And so something we can do is, we can use this idea of a supply chain, which is tracking the whole process of the coffee being created and then transported here. And by doing this, we have to trust everyone who is tracking the information each step of the way. Because if we don't, let's just say we have someone who lies about the information and they like swap it out and then put in their own like really cheap batch of coffee. If we trust them, we have no way of knowing that this coffee was swapped and it's not what we think it is. And so I guess a more concrete example that we can see, and I mean this was a few months ago, but the idea of like the vaccine rollout for COVID, and I forgot exactly what the numbers were, but I think there were something like hundreds of doses, and this is like right at the start, right when the vaccine was approved. There were like hundreds of doses that went missing. And what we'd seen is we probably had some sort of like faulty oracle equivalent where somehow these doses got lost or taken because there wasn't accountability and there wasn't like a trustworthy oracle or like entity that's keeping track of where these vaccines are going. So we can see that even regardless of if we use Bitcoin or like Ethereum, whatever it may be, we can still use blockchain and like oracles for supply chain. And this is actually one of the more talked about use cases. So if you're interested in supply chain, I definitely recommend checking it out and exploring how it's being used nowadays. And then getting into regulation a little bit, the idea of like KYC, know your customer, and AML, which is like anti-money laundering. And these were, at least with AML, these laws were created pretty much from the beginning and even since the beginning, like blockchain and Bitcoin has all been seen as like a kind of anonymous cash, even though that's not exactly what it is. And because of that, there's a lot of kind of concern around what can people get away with if they, like that's like how much can like maybe black markets or like illegal trades be kind of overseen, or not overseen, but kind of like how much can they like sneak past the government and sneak past like regulatory parties just because it's all transacted anonymously. So a lot of these laws that we see, and this is where we see a lot of the regulation coming in, a lot of these regulatory concerns come from these ideas of like anonymous actors, like anonymous accounts, and decentralization, because it's a lot trickier to connect identities or like public keys with an actual person's identity. And so just to give a little example right here, so has anyone heard of Libra? Anyone heard of this at all? Yeah? Well, for anyone who hasn't heard about it, so Facebook announced it a little while ago, but it is a stablecoin that they announced in June 2019. And there was a lot of like kind of global concern about this from different banks, because what it meant is that if it were adopted worldwide or like adopted globally, then it would require a lot of like internal changes in terms of like the internal architecture and how different, like kind of how banks would interact with it. Because if it's the standard and the banks are all trained in, like they're all created in one way, but then Libra introduces a complete new opportunity for like a new way of doing things, there was a lot of clash in the middle. And so that's one of the challenges, is like integration. And so I know that was mentioned earlier, but that is, I'd say probably one of the, besides scalability, I'd say that is the biggest barrier to entry that, and this is just my opinion, but I think that is the biggest barrier to entry that blockchain has in our daily life. And then as we see too, I mean, this has all kind of changed a little bit with Coinbase and other custodial accounts that will keep track of your currencies, but in terms of like complicated like user interface and user experience. And so what this just means is it's just difficult to interact with Bitcoin or with different cryptocurrencies. And at least before, a lot of the times, we see that these different like apps or different ways online on your computer to get Bitcoin didn't exist. And so it was a lot trickier to actually get involved and like, get involved in interacting with crypto. And so we're seeing that a lot of improvements are coming, and this is at the forefront of a lot of companies, just to make it easier for anyone who wants to trade, buy, and sell crypto to do so. And then one of the last things I'll talk about here is the idea of like reputation. Well, like what we talked about in lecture 2, when we talked about the history of Bitcoin, like the idea of the Silk Road, which was the anonymous marketplace, there was a reputation that a lot of fraud, and only fraud, lied in blockchains. And so by seeing that, it's becoming more and more like accepted by different communities, banks, and like, as we see, like with each day we see like the price of Bitcoin go up, we can kind of relate that to people believing in it and believing that this isn't just some kind of made up cash, but it actually does have some underlying value, and that we can trust the value to hold somewhat of these currencies. And just getting into this next point, which is like the rocky transition. And so as we see, the reason why I talk about the rocky transition is that it's a balance, because either banks have full control or like kind of blockchain systems have full control, but there is this middle ground. So within these two sides, like this is kind of the spectrum here, as one gains power, the other loses power. And because banks have held power for so long, because that was really the only solution, like we need some kind of third party to regulate all these transactions, we see that this isn't necessarily the case anymore. And we're seeing the banks are losing power, and it's done on a very small scale, like a slow transition. But who knows, because we might see that banks are going to switch to decentralized systems, and it's going to completely skew the status quo and skew how we've worked with money for centuries. And regardless, as you can probably expect, this is a transition, and it's a big time of change, and that's what's so exciting about this field, is that this is a really, really cool time to be involved and to be knowledgeable about blockchain, which is why I applaud all of you for taking this class and for really learning and putting in effort, because that's how you're going to learn and know how to kind of know either where to join it if you're interested in joining, or just know what it's all about, and hopefully make some money if you're interested in investing. And so, Ava, do you want to go over some of the current events? What do you mean there?
Yeah, VCs invested record $6.5 billion in crypto. Blockchain in Q3 CB Insights. DOJ to hire director for its crypto.
Okay, I can do this. Okay, and on SEC, so, okay, well.
Basically, there's just a lot going on right now. Venture capital is very hot on crypto. There's I think Coinbase Ventures has invested in 25 companies this year. The DOJ is getting involved with crypto. The SEC, as you know, the chair of the SEC, Gary Gensler or something, his number one thing right now is cracking down on crypto. But they just approved their Bitcoin futures ETF, which is going to open crypto up to a wider investor base, which is a controversial move. So there's just a lot going on in the news right now that's showing that we are making this transition that Nate was talking about. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, cool. So now we're going to go over steps to get involved. If you feel like you've been moved in some way by this class and you want to say, okay, what now? How do I get involved? We're going to go over steps to do that. So the first thing is start with what Blockchain Berkeley has to offer. We're the native Berkeley hub for blockchain, even though there's more popping up every day. So for example, our meetup that we have this Friday, I guess that's actually a wider ecosystem event, but that's one way to stay up to date and stay involved. The demo day career fair, for example, with the accelerator that we have on the 22nd. We have 2 edX courses, but honestly, after doing this class, I think a lot of the information in the edX courses would be pretty repetitive, but we also have the developers decal if you want to get more technical with it. We put on some community events every semester. You can also always reach out to us with any blockchain-related questions. There's always people that are interested. Staying educated, staying up to date, keeping up with news, reading what's at the cutting edge right now. There's new consensus mechanisms, for example, coming out every day. There's new ways to, the Mina protocol, I think, has some sort of, have you guys heard of Mina? They claim that they're able to store the entire blockchain on literally no storage, which is crazy and unheard of, because they have this cool recursive proof that they do. So for example, that's something that didn't exist a couple of years ago. So just staying up to date and learning about these new protocols, learning about, reading the GitHub repos, just staying up to date on what actually are these protocols doing, because everything is open source, so you can read through all of it if you can, do you speak the language? Obviously, observe the blockchain ecosystem, so staying up to date on.
Also, hopefully we're giving you the tools to be able to do this. So if you, I think at this point too, you'll have such a strong baseline that maybe find a challenging one people to read, and you'd be surprised by how much of it you understand. And if there are things you don't understand, there are things that you can look up and then learn about, and then you throw that into your own personal library, and from there you can talk blockchain with anyone.
And write your final paper about it. So these are just a few companies that are in the blockchain ecosystem that you can stay up to date with, observe, see what they're doing, see what they're coming out with. What's their V2, what's their V3, for example. If you know Uniswap, they're a pretty big decentralized exchange. We went over DEXs a couple of lectures ago. They just came out with their V3, which totally is different from their V2. And you could read all the white papers and see what's changed and see what's different, and just stay up to date. Also, blockchain careers aren't exclusively technical. So obviously, if you have technical skills, then you can go into development. But they're not technical at all, by any means. They need business people. They need designers. They need writers, they need everything. It's an industry just like any other industry, so assuming that you can only be a developer is totally wrong. So keeping that in mind if you're interested in getting involved in the industry, and also if you're interested, come talk to us. We have both worked in the industry as well, and I think at least I want to as my career. I don't know about you. Do you want to?
Sure.
Maybe. Join communities. There's a ton of Discord, chats, Reddit. The SF Blockchain Week is, I think, the biggest, or used to be the biggest blockchain week, and it was organized by the past president of blockchain at Berkeley. So that's like right here in SF. There's NFT NYC going on, which obviously that's a big jump, but if you want to fly to New York to join that, you could do that, I guess. So there's a bunch of communities to get involved with. Continuing your education, not just with this class, there's a ton of other resources online. None of it is better than our class, I don't think, but you can continue in any shape or form that you want. They go into depth on different things. So if you are specifically interested in financial technology and learning about how crypto regulation works, then you can take a Harvard Law School on that specifically. If you want to learn about specifically the Lightning Protocol, which we went over in our scalability lecture, you can do that. So there are classes on that. Oh, and with that, we end our final lecture. Or not our final lecture, but our final slides lecture, basically. Our future lectures are going to be more interactive and more guest speakers, and you're going to be able to ask a lot of questions. So thank you.
So, quick thing. So, just for the future. So, we'll get into just what lies ahead as we wrap up the semester. So, we have a few things. We're going to have a few speakers who are going to be presenting on other topics that you might be interested in. We'll post more information about those, but those will be starting next week, and then we will also start to talk more about the paper. So we'll save a little class time to kind of allow you to walk around and talk with other people. If you want to brainstorm or even share your ideas, run them by other people, run them by us, there will be time for that. And then we'll have some industry speakers come by as well. And so they'll be presenting in lecture, during this time slot. And yeah, that's most of it.
Guess what our attendance code is?
What's the attendance code? I'm not going to guess. What's the attendance code? Anyone have any guesses? I don't know what it is. Is it all of the labs again? All right, well, your attendance code is AVA is the best. I disagree, but agree to disagree. But other than that, that's it for today. We'll stick around if you have anything, but thanks, everyone. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
If you ever just want attendance credit, just walk in at the end, get the attendance code, walk out.